Are we ready to record?
Yeah, all good to go.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Group on Monday, the 4th of September 2003. Apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillors Best and Hussey.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Members of the Fire and Rescue Authority are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare both orally and in writing any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2000, the Fire and Rescue Authority Standing Orders and the Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll take that as a no. Okay, all right. Item 3, chairperson's announcements. I don't have any at all. You'll be glad to hear. Item 4, to receive minutes of the Scrutiny Group held on the 17th of April 2003. So I'll just go through them page by page for accuracy. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, next item, agenda number 5, Capital Outrun Report 2002 to 23.
Thank you, Chair. That's me. Members, I'm aware, obviously, that these reports have previously been to the FAPM committee, and in that sense, this is the last of the report for last year before you. The reports themselves are produced sort of quarterly, approximately, for FAPM, and as a result of you seeing the last one, you only see the last quarter's adjustments that have been made to the monitoring reports. So sort of apologies for that. What I'll try and do is concentrate therefore on the whole year position and the sort of key messages coming out of that, rather than go through the specifics of the detail of the report for that particular one quarter. The main summary of the year is in in paragraph 1.2 of the report, and that gives the overall position. So what that's telling you effectively is that the combined projects that we had in the programme for 22-3, plus those that came forward from the previous year, were around about £12 million worth. We actually spent about £7.9 million or £8 million during the year. There was an overspend of around £1.9 million during the year, but most of those increases were met by grant aid. So in that sense, they didn't impact directly on the Fire Authority itself. And the overall summary position of that, therefore, is about £6 million worth of work will be carried forward to the current financial year and is now in the programme for the current financial year. The key message, I suppose, that comes out of that is yet again, we've underspent the programme. And there's been a trend in the service over a number of years where we've always been effectively underspending the programme. Largely what happens is we underspend, we then take those schemes forward to the next year, and then in attempting to catch up, we never quite get up to speed with the New Year's programme, and therefore there's another series of sort of slippages to the forward programme as well. What we've been trying to do is be a bit more, perhaps the word is sensible, perhaps is realistic, I don't know which word it is, in terms of setting the programme, so we can be knowing that we're going to hit targets, that we're going to deliver what we're actually scheduling in the programme. And to support that, we have actually had the Fire Authority put in the budget some additional resources, particularly on the property side, to actually enable us to accelerate the programme and get more schemes done during the year. So we're hoping that will address the position going forward. But in terms of this report, obviously, it still reflects that previous trend towards underspending. So I think that's the one key message of the report. In the table in paragraph 2.2 of the report, it obviously summarises the position. You see the budget at 12 million, the actual spend of around 7.9 million, and a variance of 4 million. Now, of course, to the extent that there's a variance and underspending on the programme in itself, that's also reflected in less of a funding requirement for the programme as well. So that's of a benefit to the revenue budget of the authority, because it reduces the call on our capital financing budget. The remainder of the report sort of focuses on the actual individual component parts of the programme, setting out the various bits of it in terms of property and fleet, which are some of the more substantial parts of the programme, and highlights those schemes where underspends have occurred, and gives some background to the actual nature of them. You'll see in a number of areas there are obviously delays to the works. Of particular note with regards to the vehicle replacement programme, and this has been a consistent picture. There's been an issue about completion of the vehicles and delivery before the 31st of March. So we've ended up underspending on what essentially is a technicality. Obviously, we don't pay for the vehicles until they're finally delivered, and we end up underspending even though the vehicles might be delivered just after the end of the financial year. So it perhaps looks a bit worse than it is in terms of the delays on those types of things. Really, other than that, Chair, I don't think there are any major messages coming out of the actual report for scrutiny itself. Obviously, members are happy to take questions from members or observations from members, which can be fed back to officers and the FAPM in terms of the way in which the programme is conducted, or indeed the messages that are coming out around the delays or whatever. Happy to take members' questions or comments.
Okay, I've got one person raise their hand, unfortunately. I've got two now, but I can't see who it is. So whoever put their hand up first, please carry on.
Yeah, I think that's myself, Chair. Just to jump in on at this point. Just to follow on from the issues that Chris has raised, I think the slippage of expenditure due to delayed deliveries might be useful. For example, in the case of water ladders, refuse tender equipment, to have some narrative in the report today. I appreciate that Chris has brought us up to speed on that. But I think what would be helpful is to have some dates and brief description of the works that have been ordered, and then an explanation of why there is that delay. It's not intended by any criticism whatsoever, but it's just to give us an understanding of what's happening, because what difficulties we're experiencing, obviously others will. I think the other comment then is, again, with the supply property section on section 2.4, I take it that we're picking up that there are inflationary increases on the supply side, and it makes people perhaps if we have just again a bit of narrative about that, so we can see exactly how that's hitting us, and more importantly, where we stand in the future then. So thank you, Chair.
Chair, do you want me to just pick up those two questions briefly?
Yes.
There's a very short comment. Appreciate that there's not much detail in there, Martin, in respect of the water ladders, indicating that of the 7 that were ordered that were slipped, they've now been delivered during April 2023. Now, I haven't got specifics about whether they were all at the same time or whether there were delays in them, albeit that it does bring the vehicle replacement programme now up to date. It is a challenge. I mean, we do target, obviously, for delivery before the end of the year. It is simply down to the practicalities of these vehicles are a long time in procurement, so they're not just the purchase of an off-the-shelf vehicle. It's often the purchase of chassis and then a build and then components added to that vehicle after the build. And obviously all of that takes time, and it simply is a case of not hitting the right target at the right time. I mean, if you want any more detail, I can get the detail for you, but that's the general position on that. in respect to the property side of it, yes, inflation is hitting. Perhaps one of the key effects of that, other than the obvious one, which is that prices are going up. What we found is historically you could tender a project and get fixed prices for the build on that contract on the basis that the price on the tender would be held for a specific amount of time. And most of the component parts of the contract would also be fixed as well. What we're finding is those timeframes during which tender prices will be held are shortening, so that they are only held for a much shorter length of time. And often what we're finding now is that contractors are unwilling to hold individual parts of that tender in terms of fixed price, because the components themselves are subject to huge degrees of variability. So things like steel prices and stuff like that are often in big contracts now and are being put in as sort of provisional pricing with a revisit clause in the event that things substantially change during the term of the contract. So it's that's proving challenging as well, in terms of making sure we've got certainty on the project numbers as they kick off and during their currency. So yeah, what we can try and do in future reports in terms of FAPM is give a little bit of narrative around that in terms of what's actually driving those changes.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Can I just pick up on that, Chris? You've got 113,000 for Whitchurch. Does that mean with the delays, obviously with inflation, does that mean that 113,000 is going to go up?
No, I think given that one's close to final account and finishing, that should be a final position, hopefully. I don't think that one is likely to go up from there. Hopefully that is a more of a fixed figure.
Yeah, it was. This is fine.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Trevor.
I got two questions, Chair. One is the delays which we've had this financial year. Would that account for all of the underspend or the larger proportion of the underspend? And the second question is, how is it going to affect next year's budget in regards to purchasing of equipment and so on?
So almost all of the underspend is down to delays in project. There's no other significant component parts of it that I want to draw your attention to. Perhaps when I come on to the medium-term financial plan report further on in the agenda, I'll come back to the issue about the kind of onward programme and what that looks like and the impact on our budget, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Carr's indicating in the room.
Yes, fine.
Chair, I was thinking about the revenue projections, because presumably once a capital project is actually completed, there is then an impact for revenue negatively or positively. So with this level of slippage, what's that doing to those predictions? Would you feel that next year, or?
I think that's the point I was going to pick up when we get to the medium-term financial plan. There are different component parts of the capital financing budget. One is payable on completion of projects, which is known as the minimum revenue provision. So that's where we have to effectively make provision for repayment of any debt that we incur as a result of doing the project.
Yeah.
And the other one is the interest on any borrowing we actually take out. So if there's a delay in the project, in the capital program, and a delay in the completion of the projects, then clearly what we'll see is a reduced cost in year.
So my question is more about it then costs revenue money to run the whatever it is, capital building.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. So yes.
You know.
So yeah, there is a saving effectively pushed forward. If things don't come on stream, then yes, there potentially is a saving in terms of the in-year position of that. So what we would be looking at, for instance, if you had
going cost, if it's to do with energy or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So the timing of completion of project does have an impact. Less so with refurbishments, because obviously the buildings are still functioning in some respect. If they're new builds, then clearly there's a direct impact where it doesn't come on stream. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Any other questions? No. Okay, all right. We're recommended to note the report. Thank you. Item agenda number 6, which is the revenue outturn report. I'm assuming this is the Chris Barton show.
Yep, it is. I'm afraid you're going to have a lot of finance for a few minutes. So this
Carry on.
report, same comments as I made on the capital one apply in this one. Chair. Obviously, this is the final report that went to FAPM in terms of the revenue outturn. So does tend to specifically deal with the last quarter for financial reporting. However, obviously the main messaging coming out of it is included in the report in the summary of the overall financial year. And again, in paragraph 2.2 of the report, it gives an overall position statement. So the outturn on the actual revenue budget was very close. It was an underspend of about £100,000. So in a sort of 70 odd million pound plus budget, sorry, 80 million now, sorry. We've kind of been near as damn it spot on the outturn position. However, what that does is it hides a number of variances within the report that are outlined in paragraph 2.2 of the report. There is an overspend against employee budgets, and it's quite significant. And this is largely down to the fact that for the last few years now, and ongoing in this year, and it will be in next year, I'm sure, it's been very difficult to second guess what pay awards are likely to be. And as a result, when we're estimating, we're going on the best information we have in terms of either the state of negotiations for pay or an anticipated position that we might get to. And obviously, in respect of 22-23, we had constructed the budget on a fairly conservative estimate of what pay awards would be for that year, i.e. they were going to be in the normal range of 1.5% to 2%. But clearly, as inflation took off, unprecedented levels of inflation took off with the energy crisis and so on, what we ended up with is settlements of pay increases for the year that were well in excess of the estimated amounts that we had in. This is not unique to the fire service. It'll be the same story, I suspect, throughout all public sector bodies within Wales. And as a result of that, our pay budget has significantly overspent as we picked up that additional pay cost. That, however, somewhat fortuitously, somewhat by planning, was offset by a number of other items. So there was a £500,000 underspend on non-employee budgets. That's where we made savings against non-pay budgets, but also an additional £1.6 million worth of income, which has effectively offset that overspend on pay. So you could say, well, it's good budget management, and I would say that, wouldn't I? But the fact is we've had a number of fortuitous items that have come in to offset that significant pay pressure. And I will return to that particular subject when I do the medium-term financial plan report next as well. So again, you know, throughout the rest of the report, there are ups and downs in terms of the individual component parts of that budget that have been reported over the years. And if I just pop through to Appendix 2 of the report, which is on page 31 of your 29 of your agenda, I believe. I can see the page number on my version. Yes, it is. What that gives members is a sort of summary of the whole year, effectively showing each of the component parts of the over and under spends on the budget, with a summary of the variances that were reported to FAPM throughout the year. And you'll see there the commentary regarding the pay awards and each of the component parts, which explains that. As I say, it's tempting to say from a scrutiny perspective that it was a well-managed year. It was, in the sense that all budgets that we could manage within the controls that we had were managed reasonably well. The pay is out of our control. It's a national negotiation. So we don't, as a fire authority, set pay rates for our own employees in isolation. So therefore, whilst we can control the actual employees we have and the numbers we have, what we can't do is control pay awards, and therefore we're at the whim of the market, as they say, in that respect.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, thanks, Chris. Any questions, anybody? Trevor?
Okay, Two questions. Chris, is it Westminster or Welsh Government we talking about? We're under.
In terms of pay awards, Councillor Watkins, they're set nationally across the UK for
Right,
uniformed firefighters. So they're equally, the pay awards are equally applicable in Wales and England.
Okay, that's okay. So it's Westminster that sets the criteria for that. So what is the target? The next question is, what is the Westminster's target for inflation next year, which will give us some rough idea? I won't say a permanent fixture, but obviously it gives us some idea of what sort of inflation figure that they're looking at. Would we attempt that inflation figure in regards to wages and salaries next year?
We do look at key indicators like that. I mean, it's difficult because obviously the inflation level itself is being managed by the Bank of England rather than the government. And we know that their long-term target is 2.5%. The question is, are they going to achieve that within the timescales that we're talking about? And I think the second question around that is, what will be the rep body's view of the acceptability of percentages that low, given the historical position of inflation over the last couple of years? That I'm sure you'll be well aware, as I'm well aware, that the rep bodies argue across the country that they've seen 10 years of underinflation pay rises, and therefore they're playing catch up. Now, again, the difficulty we've got is trying to assess what the level of inflation will be, what the likely pay award will be settled at, given the national negotiation machinery, which we don't have a direct part to play in that negotiation. So it's difficult is the answer. And I mean, I'll come on to this in more detail in the actual MTFS report next. We've got to try and find a balance is the answer. And it's difficult.
We are monitoring the situation, Chris, are we?
Yeah, constantly. I mean, there are numerous people doing that for us as well. The Wales fiscal study undertaken by representatives on behalf of the WLGA do work to inform us what the sort of economy and the economic position is going to look like going forward. But like all of us, they're all struggling with a lack of information at the moment. It's all very difficult to predict.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no problem. And yes, I can see a hand up, just about. I've got a very small screen here, so I apologise.
Thank you, Chair. There's more of a comment at this stage. It was a bit of an additional challenge for scrutiny in terms of the presentation, which I can understand trying to highlight that underspend, but there's across the three reports, there's a slight inconsistency in the presentation of those figures, which I think is just offering an additional challenge when it comes to scrutinising them, because it looks as, you know, typically you would expect to see a minus with red, as you know, the wrong side of balance line, you're in debt as opposed to in credit, whereas obviously this is trying to represent that underspend. But I do think it's just something worth thinking about, whether it's in terms of narrative or code by the tables. But it did take it was an extra challenge when it came to actually trying to scrutinise and interpret what's happening across those three tables.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Yeah, I think the answer to that is we've had numerous conversations, both in FAPM and scrutiny in the past over the presentation of the figures in the report. And what I will do is I will take a look at the report with the team and try and see if we can arrive at a consistent approach to how the figures are either shown as positives, negatives, reds, blues, greens, whatever they are, so that hopefully there's a consistent theme throughout all of the reports.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any more questions? No, we're all saving them up for the next agenda item. Thank you very much, members. We're asked to note that report. Next is item agenda number 7, which is the medium-term financial strategy and revenue budget update report. Mr. Barton, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite a sizable report, so I'll try and summarise it rather than go through every single component part of it. This report has not been to FAPM or Fire Authority yet. So you're seeing it in a sort of pre-scrutiny environment, if you like. And therefore your comments are welcome to FAPM or the Fire Authority in due course in terms of the scrutiny committee's views of the world. The actual report itself is updating the medium-term financial plan to the extent that we have firm information going forward. It's quite difficult, as I've said, in this environment to actually determine with any degree of certainty some of the numbers that are going to be involved here. So what we base it on is essentially some best guesses in terms of the actual figures themselves. It's set against a background clearly of a huge amount of volatility in the world. We have a situation where Welsh Government last year gave some indicative figures to local authorities about their funding situation, so we're aware of those. We're also aware, however, of statements made by the First Minister recently around the incredible challenges within the Welsh public sector finances of trying to settle a budget, given the inflationary hit that's been taken in the current financial year. So, in summary, the financial position of the authority in terms of the medium-term financial plan, for a number of years now, we've been playing catch up with the inflationary pressures in the economy. And as I've just indicated, the pay inflation for last year's outturn was running well ahead of our budget figures. And the same situation, therefore, occurs in the current financial year. We've seen pay awards which have exceeded not only the estimates for last year, but also picking up the impact of the previous year as well. And at the moment, the first budget monitoring report of this year that will be going to FAPM is sort of forecasting somewhere between £1.5 and £2 million worth of budget pressures in the current year. So that there's an overspend coming on the budget in the current year. And that's really the context of trying to set the budget for next year. In terms of the report itself, what we've done is we've effectively gone back to base budget. We've built up what we believe to be the inflationary pressures in 23-24, the current financial year. We then added on the 24-25 inflationary pressures, and we've also included bids from service areas to actually spend money on things that they believe are upcoming within the service itself. And when you put all that information into the actual model, what it comes up with is a total year-on-year growth of £7 million. And that equates to around a 7.8% increase in budget. Now, that's quite a significant challenge in terms of both the service, but also its funding partners. Welsh Government issued a potential indicative settlement for next year for local authorities of 3.1%. So already our modelled position in terms of our budget year on year is well over twice the increase that the indicative settlement from Welsh Government to our funding partners is likely to be. So that's likely to be a huge challenge for us, and something that I think the FAPM is going to be asked to look at, and is going to be asking senior management within the authority to actually look at, to see whether there's a way of actually bringing that number down. And I'm sure our local authority partners who are funding us will also be asking that question: how can we bring that down to a more reasonable figure? The issues clearly are manifold. We're in a position where we know we need to maintain investment in our current response services, and we also, as a service, have long since held the belief that we need to maintain investments in initiative aimed at reducing the demand on our response. So, in other words, our community safety type work and things like that are actually critical to keeping responses low. We also know, however, that we've got a culture review ongoing, and as yet we don't know what the impact of that is likely to be in terms of the need for investment or other work or activity that might be needed to address specific things flowing from that. And it's also against the background of the fact that as a service, as a fire and rescue authority, we have little in the way of discretionary services. The one disadvantage we have in comparison to perhaps other public sector bodies is that whilst they have discretionary services that they can reduce, the fire authority itself does not have significant amounts of discretionary services that it can withdraw from. Perhaps the other major sort of issue for me in terms of dealing with the medium-term financial plan for the next year and beyond is that the comments from Welsh Government would indicate that there might be reductions not only from the indicative settlements that local authorities have been given, but also in terms of specific grant funding coming out of specific Welsh Government departments as well. And we do receive grant funding for things like our community safety work. So we may see grants being cut as well. Now, in these figures, we've not accounted for, at the moment, reductions in grant for those core services. However, it is a risk which I think we need to be mindful of as we go forward. So it's against that backdrop, really, that we've sort of drawn up the medium-term financial plan. Councillor Watkins, you asked about sort of pay awards and things like that. What the medium-term financial plan in front of you does is it picks up all of the pent-up demand in pay that we currently are aware of. So it picks up the agreed 7% and 5% 2-year settlement that went to uniformed staff that was agreed last year, that covers this year as well. It also picks up the current offer on the table to the non-uniform staff in terms of the current year, but we know that there are strikes planned to actually try and improve that offer. So we don't know whether that's going to go up, but we've gone with the offer that's currently on the table for that. And the big question for us is the question you essentially asked, which is where's inflation going to be and where's pay increases going to be for 2024-25? Now, at the moment, and I'll take your views on this. At the moment, we have modelled this on a 3% pay settlement for 24-25. Now, that's on the basis that the Bank of England is going to continue with its policy of targeting interest rate increases to lower demand and therefore lower price inflation within the economy. Now, whether or not that will achieve a 3% pay award for the following year is a moot point. I'll actually be with 22 council treasurers on Friday this week, with a view to getting a sort of considered view across the public sector in Wales about what their beliefs are around pay. And I think that will inform us all about what a general consensus position is going to be around the economy for next year. But there is a danger we will be playing catch up again, at those levels. That is a clear danger and a clear risk. And I hopefully have said that many times within the report. So that's the sort of the headlines, if you like, in terms of the medium-term financial plan and the report before you. I welcome any questions, welcome any comments from members in respect to this report. I say it will be going to FAPM in a week or two's time, so those comments can be fed into FAPM for their consideration as well.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Chris. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the meeting on Friday, Chris, will you be able to give us some feedback from what was discussed and any indication?
Sorry, it's this Friday coming, Martin. Sorry,
Right.
this Friday. So yeah, what we will do is, I mean, I will be feeding that information to FAPM, obviously, at the meeting. This report will be maybe slightly updated before it finally goes out to FAPM in that regard. Right. It will only be other people's views. There will be no hard facts coming out of that meeting, because inevitably this is one of the major problems that we have with all of our budget cycles, is we are trying to second guess what these key indicators are.
Okay, thank you. Second question then, Chair, is about Welsh Government funding. That there's a sentence within 2.3.2 that there's a wider initiative underway to reduce specific grants to reduce administration costs. I'd be interested to know how much staff resource is going in from ourselves to make grant applications, because my experience of some of them, they're very technical and involve a huge amount of resource and staff time. Would you be able to give an indication, Chris, of how we are able to deal with that at the moment, and how you see the situation changing if we do go down this road of grant reductions?
So perhaps I could start with the the resource thing first. It's not a huge amount of resource that goes in. I appreciate what you're saying around bidding for grants. There's not the same bidding context in terms of a grant submission that perhaps local authorities would be familiar with, where there's competition between organisations for grants. So it is very much a process type thing where we apply for the grants. It's an annual thing, so it's a repeat of previous submissions. So I think we've probably got one officer who spends part of their time doing that. It's not a huge amount of input, I would have said, albeit we do have to go through the monitoring procedures and submission of claims and other things to complete that process off. So there is a cost. I think from the point of view of Welsh Government, what they'd done is they'd put a general statement out that they saw any grant that was under around £4 million per annum as being in scope, if you like, for review, because clearly the smaller the grant is, the higher proportion of it is driven by administration costs. And I did actually ask Welsh Government recently that the question, all of South Wales's grants in totality are kind of around £4 million. So the question was, well, would that mean that the fire branch down at Welsh Government would effectively be looking to sort of get rid of all of those grants? And if so, how would they do that? The response I had back was that the £4 million was a very much a generic figure that had been thrown out there. And because the grants for fire branch were relatively smaller, because their budget is smaller, the £4 million might not apply. So therefore, it's possible that their grants would continue in the normal way, even though they were less than £4 million. So it's not necessarily the case that all small grants would go in that context. So I think that gave us some reassurance that it wasn't just everything would be thrown in the bin. What they couldn't do, of course, was offer any assurance around decision making around grants and whether individual grants would continue. The issue we had in last year's budget, if you recall, was that what happened towards the very end of the budget process, the ministerial portfolio, they took the decision that they would stop grants. One of them, a large one, was transferred into the local authority settlement, but the other one for Airways was simply stopped and cut. And I suppose that's the concerning one. You know, is it possible that we could see a cut to any of the community safety type stuff next year, or a reduction in it? We've seen it before. They cut it several years ago. The authority made the decision to carry on with the work and carry the cost of that by continuing to do the work. But we simply won't know that until later in the budget process. So, you know, again, it's difficult to start throwing figures into a medium-term financial plan on the assumption we're going to lose grants until we know that we're going to lose them. And it would be wrong to do so, in my judgment. So that's the sort of summary position, if you like. No automatic process going on, but there is everything will be up for reconsideration during this budget round within Welsh government, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Trevor, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Chris, first of all, thank you very much for the explanation on the budget and what have you, but I got two concerns really. The extra duties that Welsh Government are going to propose to put onto the Fire Authority, I'm concerned of whether that's going to be an extra cost. Now, there's been an issue at one fire authority that a number of officers are not DBS checked. Well, if Welsh Government are actually going to implement Welsh Fire Services to attend trips, falls and slips at vulnerable people's homes, then surely fire officers should be DBS checked. Can you tell me whether our officers in the Welsh Fire Service are DBS checked? If not, obviously it's going to be an extra cost to the fire service.
I think that there's a question about how that's taken forward, Councillor Watkins. The one thing I've said on a more general point on this within the report is the whole issue around the widening of the role of firefighters is not accommodated within this report. And I've said that for a number of years, because essentially if if Welsh Government want to enter into a discussion with fire authorities and their staff about changing the role of firefighters, there are a number of costs that will come out of that, not least of which, of course, is basic pay, because the rep bodies are already on record saying that if they see a broadening of the role, they see a fundamental rewriting of the contract and therefore increased pay. So there is nothing in this report that looks to accommodate the cost of that. And we've said as a fire authority for many years that if that was going to happen, it would have to come with resources. You know, it's not something that could be easily accommodated by the fire authority's own budget, and it's not something that would be rightly passed back to the local authority constituent authorities, because they haven't got the resources to pick that up either. So that's the sort of general position in respect of broadening the role as we speak.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Kerry, yep, I can see you.
Kate.
The report indicates the complicated calculations for working out what our level of reserve should be, but then goes on to describe them as healthy. I just wonder if you could give us a sense of kind of what a baseline. I'm just trying to work out, you know, how much over that calculation we might be, or
Okay.
the baseline from, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the relevant page in the report. Yep. Thank you very much. I was just trying to land on it. So the this is the question that's often asked and rarely answered, but I'll stick my neck out here. There's always been a general view in kind of public sector, particularly around the local authorities, that 5% was a figure that was bandied around in terms of the balances. The £3 million that we've got in general financial reserves at the top of that chart there is our view about what is a reasonable figure given the size of our budget, and it works out around 4%, something like that at the moment. The reason we went for that number originally was because it was based on a couple of years ago we had a number of challenges around things like industrial action and various other problems that were hitting us, and we looked at the cost of those particular projects and solutions and decided that our in-year risk around that was around about £3 million. It seemed like a reasonable figure to put in there. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that that's all of our reserves. There are a number of other reserves on that list. Some of them are effectively already committed. So, for instance, the PFI equalisation reserve, we have the PFI contract, and when we finance that contract, we set aside that reserve, and the use of that reserve is over the life of the PFI contract to effectively balance out the cost of the contract over its life. So effectively, it's already a committed sum of money. Yeah. So whilst it's sat there as a usable reserve, and you could, in theory, use it for other things, it already has a commitment attached to it, and therefore would be used for that purpose. And that's sort of similar but slightly less so with regards to things like the carbon reduction, the equality, diversity and inclusion reserves, and the equipment renewals reserves, which we set up last year to actually try and meet the costs of those particular initiatives. Now, the answer to those is we're still developing the projects in some cases around those in terms of meeting those costs. But obviously, if you take those away, you've then got to finance them from some other source, which is the issue there.
So, Chair, if I may, again, from a scrutiny perspective and a perception perspective, that is a bit of a challenge, because it looks as if there's nearly £17 million of reserves there.
Yeah.
And I think something that kind of gives a narrative around what is absolutely committed. I mean, I do then wonder if it should be, you know, it may have started in reserves, but whether it there's another way of representing that, because actually, I suppose I'm still not quite clear of that list, you know, how much more than the 3 million in general, you know, what's absolutely committed to, what is a possibility if we can afford it, and I'm not expecting necessarily an answer on all of that now, but I think by the time we're getting into those autumn conversations,
absolutely, I take your point, and with most things in life, there's no absolute answer around it. The example, probably a good example, is the PFI equalisation reserve. You know, we we undertook the PFI contract. We are committed to the costs, therefore, of that PFI contract. We can't just turn it off. Do we have to fund it from that PFI reserve? Not absolutely, no. We could effectively spend that reserve, but what would happen straight away is your revenue budget would go up each year to carry the cost of that contract. So there's a kind of a benefit and a cost to each of those decisions. And I can certainly explain a bit more about that in the report that's going to FAPM in terms of what is a commitment, what would be the impact of using those reserves in another way in terms of what would happen. And certainly,
Yeah, sorry, it's not helpful to see that commitment there. I think
Yeah.
there's just
Yeah.
just an additional
yeah,
bit of narrative, because I think again, you know, we need that resilience. There are so many variables, aren't there, with which
Yeah.
you're working
yeah,
that are, you know, you really don't have a choice on.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there are a couple of challenges around the reserve specifically coming up. And the first is, I've mentioned already, the monitoring report for this year is likely to be saying that there's a £1.5 to £2 million overspend in the current year. Well, there's only one place that's going to come from, and that's from these reserves. Now, my reference to FAPM on that will be that we need to try and get that overspend down as far as possible to avoid committing those reserves to simply fund an overspend, because it's not good value for money to be doing that. And the other aspect of that as well, of course, is that if we have an inbuilt reliance on reserves within the budget, eventually they're going to run out, and at some point you're going to have to start making difficult decisions. And I'm sort of, if the one thing I've done in 40 years in public sector finance, I'm sure Councillor Watkins will bear me out on this, is I sat in too many meetings to say to members, you know, I will not sanction a budget that effectively relies on short-term resources to fund the long-term future of the revenue budget. Yes, you can use them in ways that help us manage from day to day and perhaps even year to year, but there's got to be a long-term plan to actually get out from the reliance of balances. So yes, Councillor Carr, I'm more than happy to add a bit more detail for FAPM around some of those figures to understand what they mean. And it won't be the first time that members from the 10 constituent authorities have looked at that and said, well, can't you just use that and not put our fire levy up? And the answer is, well, if I'm honest, well, we could do that, but next year you'd be going to fire levy twice as high as an increase to put it all back again. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Martin, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, it was just to follow up on the point that Kate raised, Chair, to do with the designated reserves in general. I think we're coming out item 8, so we need to look at the forward programme of scrutiny, and if we just sort of hold that thought, because there might be one or two of these particular designated reserves that the scrutiny committee could really start focusing on, and perhaps we can revisit when we come to item 8. So.
Yep, no problem at all. Okay, all right. Any other questions on item 7? Okay, thank you very much, Chris, for all the reports and for your time. You can stay if you want, but I understand if you want to leave, it's entirely up to you.
Thank you for your input, Chair, because it's most useful in terms of informing what we should send through to FAPM and the Fire Authority. And yes, I will stay because a couple of councillors have just indicated that they're going to talk about reserves.
Okay, no problem. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, item 8 is overview of FA and committee work programmes. Over to Sarah Watkins, I believe.
Yes, morning, members. So the purpose of this report is to enable the Scrutiny Committee to identify the areas of scrutiny that it wishes to pursue the 23-24 municipal year. Just looking at the background, the committee has a specific responsibility within its terms of reference to review and/or scrutinise decisions made, actions taken in connection with the discharge of any of the Fire Rescue Authority's functions, whether by the authority or its committees. And within the terms of reference, there are 4 particular areas of scrutiny, specific functions, which are policy development and review, scrutiny, finance, which we've done some this morning already, and also performance. So it's proposed that the committee review the attached forward work programmes for each body of the authority, and to identify those areas of scrutiny that the committee wishes to review for the 23-24 municipal year. And in the appendices, we've got the forward work programmes for each of the bodies of the authority. If we could just pause there for a moment, and if we can get the views of the committee members about which reports they would like to apply scrutiny to against each of the authority bodies. We can go through it however members wish to, but this is to enable us to draw up your forward work programme for the year.
Shall I go through this page by page?
Absolutely.
Okay, we start on appendix 1 starts on page 71. Anybody's got any views? Could they make them known, please? Okay, page 72. I personally would like to see the fire false alarms report. We attend thousands of false fire alarms every year. It costs a lot of money and takes a lot of our time. So I think that would be interesting to go through, and maybe some other points would come out of that.
Despite Sarah's excellent explanation, I'm just slightly confused. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
So MTFS is coming here after FAPM regardless.
No. So what we're saying is appendices. That's okay. Appendices 1 to 4 are all the different forward work programmes for each of the committees.
Right.
So what I'm asking you to do today as a committee is to identify from, so for example, page 71,
Which is different to my agenda back, sorry.
Oh, is
I
it?
got it on a
No,
completely
but-
different page.
Yeah. But we got the forward for this committee at the end of the agenda, so that's agenda item 10. Agenda item 8, so from page 71.
Okay, apologies, Sarah.
No, that's fine.
The work programme for the fire authority and each of the committees to see if there are areas then.
So so far for the fire authority, we've had indication that the fire alarms report, which is went to the fire authority on the 17th of July. The scrutiny committee would like to receive a report to further scrutinise that activity of work.
Yeah, and I think, Chair, there was a commitment given at that meeting in the fire authority that further information reports would come back to the scrutiny committee, not go back to fire authorities. So as for the scrutiny committee to look then at progress that's been made since that date of the initial report.
Okay, what have we got a timeline for that?
I think the timeline was put for 6 months.
Okay, well, I'm happy for that. I don't know what other members think.
Okay, I was going to suggest that it's got to be a two-way process, hasn't it? Because I think rather than us cherry picking, often on committees that we might not be members of, I think what we have to do is have that dialogue with the committee members, and if issues are raised because we're limited in terms of time of meetings, if there's something that those committees want us to consider in greater detail, I think we're able to do that. If we perhaps, Chair, we could have a sort of wider discussion after you go through the pages in the report about exactly how scrutiny works and functions, because I think there are some considerations. We're not just an echo chamber for committees, but we do have some specific responsibilities that we can carry out in our own right as well.
Should bring it back.
Okay. All right. Okay, anything else from page 72? Page 73. Page 74. Page 75. And we skip to HR inequalities, page 77. Page 78. Page 79. Page 80. And page 81.
Oh, excuse me, Chair.
Yep.
Just I was looking at, sorry, I have to switch my microphone on then. On page, which one was it? I skipped starting myself because I was trying to catch up with it. Having a look at on page 80, the complaints report. I think that's something that again, I appreciate obviously the different committees, etc. But I'm wondering why it goes to HR and not to the full fire authority, given our probable interest of all the members of the fire authority in terms of where dissatisfaction has been expressed, what they are and what's been done about them, as opposed to just hearing sort of the good news. It's always a good idea to hear where service users, etc., aren't too happy. Obviously, this is my first meeting of this committee, so I'm just not sure about what the protocols, etc., are. But so I don't know what anyone else thinks. Thanks.
Sarah, can you give us a lead on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason why that at the moment is on the forward work programme for the HR committee is obviously a number of our complaints are raised around the behaviour of staff, which is clearly a HR, a people services issue, as well as organisational issue. What we could do is we could bring a précis of that report to this committee for scrutiny, and we could do some additional diving around to give the scrutiny committee a bit more of a flavour around how the complaints profile has changed over the last few years across the service. We could certainly do that prior.
Yeah, and I think when the report, I presented that report to the HR committee fairly recently for the last year. One of the things we'd asked for, because it's a new report, is so to have sort of more input into how we can develop that report going forward. So perhaps that would be a good role then for the scrutiny committee to look at ways of improving that report and what additional information they'd like to see contained within it.
Yes, please.
Is that okay, Karen?
Yes, please. Yes, thanks very much.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, page 81. Page 82. Page 83. Page 84. Page 85. Then over to page 87. Page 88. Page 89. Then page 91. And lastly, page 92.
I think there's a couple that I might want to pick up on, but I do think we need the discussion that Martin mentioned first, because it does depend on the outcome, I think, of some of that. But just as an example, I was kind of thinking, with my biodiversity champions hat on, around that report, which otherwise might not get much attention if it just goes through the full authority, and then things like the well-being objectives and PSBs as well, in some of those areas that don't always get the same level of attention. But that is the role of scrutiny committee, isn't it, to offer an opportunity to dig into that as and when needed. But I don't want to overcome the programme either.
No, exactly.
Yeah, Martin, you've got your hand raised.
Martin, is it Chair? Yeah. Okay. It's perhaps coming back to that. If we look at the forward programme that we've got as a committee, has come on later in the meeting, that is pretty much packed, and I'd hope that as the work of the committee matures, that we might be able to find things that we don't have to spend too much time on, so we can prioritise. I think Kate's raised a crucial one. I think what we ought to do as well is to be prepared for the outcome of the cultural review, because I think scrutiny committee will have a really important role to fill as far as that's concerned. Obviously, the authority in general will be considering the the thrust of that review, but there will be specific work streams that we really need to get on top of and to make sure that that's being delivered. We'll just raise a few points then, Chair, on the whole scrutiny process. I think we need to look at the overarching themes as we've suggested to, in addition to what Kate has said, perhaps the carbon reduction schemes, and also a new initiative really has been taken on by the fire authority. It started off in Ogmore Vale, where the station has been awarded a green flag, and so I think the other stations and other members of the authority would be keen to see that rolled out, see if we can really make a further impression as far as that's concerned. I think another area of work for the authority as well is to do with some of the capital projects that we are pursuing at the moment. We've got a template for station redesign. We're starting off in Pontycummer, and we've got 8 or 9 other stations which will follow. I think there are lessons to be learnt about the way that project is progressing, and to make sure that that's properly delivered on time. So I think again, that might be something that doesn't quite fit in the committee structure at the moment, which scrutiny could take up. I don't know how members feel about the idea of actually getting out some of those stations as well, out to areas. I know that members are, time limited, and we've got the additional consideration of hybrid meetings. But I think where possible and on occasion, I don't think it would do us any harm to actually go out and about a bit. If it's only to hold our meetings in those venues, but it would then give us an opportunity to have a look around, start to meet people on the ground, and see what staff think of what we're doing as well. So that's just another one to flag up. Sorry, Sarah.
It's your forward work programme.
Yeah. The other issue then is about got member champions, and I really, take my hat off to those members of the authority who do take additional time to take on particular interests. But apart from, I think there's a meeting once a year with scrutiny, we don't really have that interrelationship with those members. I think we get a formal report back. But there are issues, I think, that those members, when they are out and about, will pick up, and it would be good if they could feed those back to us directly as well, because there might be concerns just need that additional degree of attention. So I think it is really a question of us being sensible and realistic about how much work that we can take on. And if as a result of the discussion today, Chair, that we can at least agree on some of these key themes as, again, returning to the designated reserves, where there are some sort of key big spend projects there, that we can make sure that we don't lose sight of them either. So, thank you.
Okay, provided that it's within our remit, because obviously our scrutiny committee is constituted, I don't see an issue. If there are any specific items that you want brought forward or to look at, please email Sarah and myself, and we can put them on the forward work programme. It's fairly flexible. I don't think there's any issues with that. In terms of going and visiting other stations and getting champion members in, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. But obviously, we've all got to make plans as far in advance as we can, because obviously we've all got other things to do as councillors. So yep, I got no problem with that. Perhaps we can have a discussion around that later, maybe at another meeting, or maybe after the Fire Authority meeting, we can sit down and just go through any stations we want to visit, or any champions that we want to bring forward.
I come into that point around the visits. Part of the piece of work that Sarah and I have been looking at recently is coming up with a member development programme, and part of that, one thing we are looking at is arranging a range of visits for all Fire Authority members to visit, particular sites, with specific interest, really. I mean, one of the first ones I think we need to get Fire Authority members to visit is a joint fire control. It's one of the probably the most key component within the service in terms of our operational response. So we think it's vital that members get a visit to that site, and some of the other sort of close vicinity sites on the same day. So make the most use of time and opportunity. But then, like I said, looking at wider visits as well across other stations. So yeah, it's certainly something that we've got in the plan and in consideration. So I hope that that's something that we'll be able to come back with fairly soon in terms of that. The other thing I was thinking is some of the key themes that are coming up, around sustainability, capital investment. I think they very much tie back into the suggestion you said around the reserves. So there's the key elements within those reserves, so which would naturally lend themselves then to mirror, so mirror the use of reserves, and also the strands within the member champions as well. So there's a golden thread across those. Yeah. So if you want to sort of target the reserves in terms of using the themes that fall out of it, then having officers' reports coming back.
And Chair, just to support what Councillor Hughes was saying around the culture review, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that is one in particular that will need to go to HR, will need to come to scrutiny and discussion of fire, probably even finance as well, in terms of a range of different scrutiny issues, so that it is, across and throughout everything, taking that.
Some of the early discussions or early considerations we've been given to that is how, when the report is published and the recommendations are made, obviously that'll initially go to Fire Authority, but do the Fire Authority then discharge the monitoring and making sure those actions are implemented via the Scrutiny Committee? Yes. So that's the initial thought process, and then whether it would be the Scrutiny Committee as it is, with the opportunity to bring in some, because it's within the terms of reference, bring in some sector specific subject matter experts as well to assist that.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you very much all. Any other input on that? Are we happy that we put these measures in place? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, item 9 is the consultation response activity by the service. Over to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Scrutiny Committee assurance that the service actively engages in consultations from other bodies to provide support to active open democracy, and to ensure that the views and opinions of the service help to shape both public policy, sector specific activity. So consultation is an absolutely activity which is undertaken by public bodies, and by consulting effectively improve both the making of policy and its implementation. And of course, as a service, every year we consult on our improvement plans and our objectives and priorities. So we do it ourselves, and we ask our communities to engage with us. So it's only right and proper that we do so across the public service as well. And taking part in those consultations provides the service with a voice and an opportunity to influence important decisions. So there are a number of open consultations, and consultations cover practically every subject under the sun at least once. The ones that we actively engage with are Welsh Government and also the National Fire Chief Council and other bodies as well, which we become aware of consultations. The process that we follow within the service is those consultations are then circulated to the appropriate head of service, who will determine if a response will be submitted, and they coordinate that activity on behalf of the service then. And what we do with the responses are they are reported internally during the senior management business team meeting, which occurs on a monthly basis. One of the things that we're creating within the organisation is a library of our consultation responses, so that we know what we've responded to and what the view of the service was at the time of that consultation. So that's something that we've started this year, and I wanted to make members aware of that. And the service also has a survey page on our intranet, where we for internal and external consultations, and this provides an opportunity for staff members to respond to appropriate consultations and questionnaires. So as well as engaging officially as an organisation, where it's appropriate and beneficial, we also provide the opportunity for staff to engage in these consultations as well. Now, in Appendix 1, you can see a screenshot of our consultation library for 23-24, and you can see there that we've actively engaged in a number of consultations already this financial year. And then moving on to Appendix 2, that gives you a couple of screenshots there about our internal surveys intranet page. And it shows us the surveys page itself, and then it shows the previous surveys that have been reviewed on this page internally. Apologies, the text is so small. This is where the benefit of electronic communication helps. And then on the final section on that appendix, you can see the current survey, which is the pension entitlements for retained firefighters. It's an external consultation that closes on the 6th of October. So the purpose of this report, like I said, is to give the Scrutiny Committee the assurance that the service does actively engage in consultation, and that we play that active role. So it's for information for members, but I'm happy to open to discussion and comments.
Okay, all right. Members are asked to note the consultation process. Are there any questions? Okay, I got Martin, you came up first.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I think, yeah, it's good to have this feedback, so see what's the work is going on. And also I appreciate that Appendix 1 is a screenshot, but I really believe it's a good idea to have edited files as a sort of principle, so that,
Okay.
you know, so that when reports are produced and you need to access anything, it's you know, it's quite a good way of doing that. Just an observation as well, as far as that's concerned, in terms of library documents, that it might be best if we could just concentrate on a fixed format, something like PDFs, which are a lot easier to display for members of the public. I think when you get use of Word sometimes and Excel, they don't often display as you would wish, but at least PDF, then you know that what is produced is a pretty sort of standardized project. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Trevor?
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, Chair. One is, will the Fire Authority be told of the result of the consultations and be able to discuss those? And will they be coming back to Scrutiny Committee as well?
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. So with regards to the Welsh Government consultations that we engage with, on the Welsh Government website, they publicise their consultation responses and the outcomes from there. So that's where we would see those results of those consultations. And then the second question was, would we be bringing that back to scrutiny? I think one of the purposes of this report would be that if there is anything that we have responded to, that you can see in the library that we've just given you a screenshot of there.
Yeah.
If something that the scrutiny committee wanted to review the detail around, we would be more than happy to bring that to the scrutiny committee in the future, so that you can see what our response was and scrutinise it effectively. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Watkins?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Sarah. Okay,
Sorry,
any
Chair,
questions?
can I just add to that, again, similar to the theme I said earlier, this committee is very much in its infancy and in development. So, you know, as and when we bring in reports like this, you know, I think that's the idea, you know, to see, you know, ask members, is there additional requirements? What would they like to see, you know, further information? So you know, in future, this report, you know, how can we develop that the best suit the members' needs going forward?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, all right, you asked to note that. Next item is item 10, forward work programme.
Thank you, Charles, for this one. So it's the standard programme that we've set out now based on the themes which Sarah covered off in her earlier report. So we've obviously got the agenda items for today. So for the November meeting, you know, we picked up on some of the themes as potential items to go into that. But by all means, if there's, you know, other considerations that members want to email either yourself, Chair, Sarah, or myself to add as items from there. If we use it as a start of a 10, those around the reserves, and then we'll develop it from there as necessary if members want. The remainder of the programme is as is set out, but as Councillor Hughes rightly pointed out, we need to be perhaps a bit flexible and consider that, you know, once the outcome of the cultural review is out, we may have to just be a bit more flexible in terms of what the programme looks like on and timings of meetings. So, but obviously that's what's set out in there at the moment is the plan for the remainder of the year. And flicking through it, the fire false alarms that you raised earlier, Chair, is on for the 5th of February meeting.
Yeah, I do apologise. I haven't got that far along. Yeah, but no, I echo what you say. This is very much an open forum. If anybody has anything that they want to bring forward, please indicate and say. If you email either myself or if you email Sarah or and just copy me in, and we'll take it from there. So anybody got anything they want to add on that?
Oh.
No, okie dokie. All right, thank you very much. Okay, next item is to consider any items of business that the chairperson deems urgent. I don't have any at all. I just want to say thank you all very much for attending. I apologise it was a little delayed, but that's technology for you. I hope you're all well and a safe journey home. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.